الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير، والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Salamun alaikum jamiyan wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what were those policies that had changed after Rasulullah and before Ali ibn Abi Talib in the Muslim world in terms of leadership and governance? What were the changes that took place? Keep that question in the back of your mind, inshallah, we'll return to it. We've been discussing the personality of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib so as to understand how we should view the world, to understand how we should have our philosophy, what philosophy we should have in place, to understand what ethics we should adopt in our life, and ultimately how we can get to our spirituality, i.e. how can we ultimately get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's spiritual proximity. And we said perhaps the best example of this after Rasulullah is Ali ibn Abi Talib's personality and his being, and how he operated in the world, and how he existed in the world. Therefore, in today's lecture, I want to further this discussion. We discussed in the previous lecture how there has been immense persecution, not only towards Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, but also the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, and how this has continued over the generations and over the centuries, and culminating and not ending with these actions that we've seen in the modern world. That is the attack on the maternity ward in Afghanistan, as well as Aya Hashim, and other countless examples that exist in our modern world. And also going back in history, Shia persecution, Shia genocide, Shia phobia is not a new phenomenon. But I want to highlight and further discussion and look at specifically, many Muslims come forward and say that the Shia, for example, have gone off the wrong end, they have deviated, they are people who are Rafidi, rejectors, and there are many certain types of other types of, for example, allegations that come forward towards Shias. And this highlights the idea, and what Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib himself says: people are enemies of that which they don't understand, or people have animosity or hatred towards that which they don't understand. And it's very clear based on these statements that many people have a less than optimal understanding of what is truly Islam. They have a less than optimal understanding of what is Shia Islam. And I want to highlight with respect to how these changes emerged. What were some of those changes that took place during the time of the other Khulafa before Ali ibn Abi Talib that deviated, that separated, that veered away from the stance and the position of the Holy Prophet of Islam? And why it is that the Shia, the followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, why they don't revere these moves, why they don't adhere to these views, why they don't find these views, that these changes that emerged by some of the Khulafa, why we don't follow them, why we don't respect them, why do we, in the sense of respect, in the sense of following and abiding by them. Yes, indeed, we have respect of personalities as our scholars, the scholars of the Shia school of thought, the rightful scholars such as the likes of Sayyid Sistani, Sayyid Hakim, Sheikh Ishaq Fayyad, Bashir al-Najafi, Ayatollah Bashir al-Najafi, may Allah protect all of them. These scholars and Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani have made it very clear that, for example, we should have respect for Muslims, Muslim brethren, and human beings and humanity at large. That is, we have a responsibility not to harm or harm people. That's not the intent here. The intent here is very clear and categorical, and that intent is to try to help the world understand that what is the Shia perspective, what is the historical facts based not necessarily on Shia literature, but in fact Ahlul Sunnah literature, and why the Shia community has these beliefs, so that at least an understanding around this can exist in the Muslim world, so that the persecution, we hope, would end or at least be mitigated or reduced. Therefore, I want to look in the brief moments that we have together. What were some of those exact things that happened in the aftermath of Rasulullah that were things that deviated from his sunnah and deviated from his tradition? We'll look at this example very clearly. Number two, I want to look at, based on this, how was Ali ibn Abi Talib's stance? How was Ali ibn Abi Talib in the day? And how was Ali ibn Abi Talib in the night? What was the stance of Ali ibn Abi Talib with respect to leadership and governance, and also his own spirituality that he taught and showed? And through these actions, how did Ali ibn Abi Talib make his philosophy known? Because whether it was leadership and rulership, or it was the instance of his own spirituality, Ali ibn Abi Talib saw them connected. And we'll look at how he saw them connected and how they led him to the same goal ultimately. And based on these highlights of these three main points, inshallah, we'll be able to look at this and further our discussion, and hopefully, inshallah, in the next few nights, get towards a conclusion of what we're actually trying to strive towards and focus on. Number one, what were some of those changes that took place during the time of the other khulafa? We mentioned the first one, just to highlight very quickly again, based on the works of Ayatollah Shamsuddin as well as the works of Sayyid Hakim, there were many different changes that took place during the time of the first three khulafa that were different than the stand of Rasulullah. What was one? One we highlighted was Saqifa Banu Sa'da. That is the first moment, the pavilion that was there where they gathered when Rasulullah was in his final moments. And in this gathering, in this congregation, in Saqifa Banu Sa'da, again, only historical facts here. There's no opinion that I'm inducing here. The reality is there was a congregation, and if you want real references, you can look at Tarikh al-Tabari, Tarikh al-Yaqubi, which I'll be focusing on highly in the next few moments. These are not Shia history books. The Tarikh al-Tabari is not a Shia history. Yaqubi is not Shia history. These histories are histories of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Therefore, based on this reality, I want to highlight and make it clear where we're coming from here. Saqifa happened. Saqifa, what were the emotions that were evoked at Saqifa? What was evoked? Tribalism. Aus versus Khazraj. Arab versus non-Arab. Muhajir, Ansar. All of these types of narratives were built up in order to rile the people to take sides. This was the first level. The second level that I want to bring to your attention was the public treasury, and this will be a major focus of our conversation today. As I mentioned and I alluded to in the previous lectures, Ali ibn Abi Talib made sure that every single person in his inaugural address, he said, I will make sure that everyone gets equal amounts from the public treasury. That means that if he said, I will now give everyone equal, that means before Ali ibn Abi Talib, the people who were ruling were not giving equal amounts of public treasury to every individual. That means there was a hierarchy. That means there was a class system. That means there was differentiation at the very least. What happened? How did this happen? Because during the time of the Holy Prophet, Ayatollah Shamsuddin says very clearly, it's very clear according to all Muslims, the amount that Rasulullah gave to everyone was equal, was even. He gave equal and even distribution amongst the Muslims in the issue and the matter of Baytul Mal, that is the public treasury. That is how much people get. As for you and I, in modern terms, this would be, for example, how much money you get from the government, whether that's the UK or American or otherwise, the amount that you get is the same under Rasulullah. Under the first Khalifa of the Muslims, Abu Bakr, that tradition remained. Abu Bakr did not change. To his credit, he did not change this sunnah or the seerah of Rasulullah. He did not change it. But when it came the time of the second Khalifa, Umar ibn Abi Khattab, the dynamics shifted. And this is very important to note. What happened during the time? According to Ayatollah Shamsuddin, what happened, and these are some of the major things which actually led to the groundwork of the revolution of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Bear these points in mind as well, as to why this is so critical. So then what he did was, as Rasulullah would distribute evenly, Abu Bakr would also, the first Khalifa, would also give to everyone equivalently. More egalitarian. But when Umar's time came, he began to change the narrative. How? He said, number one, forerunners, the people who are early into Islam, those people, they will get more. This happened, by the way, for historical reference, in the 20th year of Hijrah. Rasulullah, this is after Rasulullah, 20 years after the migration from Mecca towards Medina that marked the beginning of the Islamic calendar, 20 years after that. In the 20th year, we're told that Umar he says that now from today forward, the forerunners, the people who are early to Islam, the people who came early on, they get the most, they get more Baytul Mal than anyone else. This was unprecedented. He said, furthermore, it doesn't end here, it doesn't stop there. He says, Muhajirun of Quraysh get more than other Muhajirun. Muhajirun, those people who migrated from Mecca towards Medina. Of the people who migrated from Mecca towards Medina, there was also different groups amongst them. Within those people who migrated from Mecca to Medina, those Muhajirun, of them, the Qurayshi, or the ones from Quraysh, they got more than everyone else. Number two. Number three, all the Muhajirun got more stipend or got more Baytul Mal wealth than all of the Ansar. All of the people that were from Medina, they made less or they got less than all of the people who came from Mecca, all the Muhajirun. Notice all of these dynamics. Number four, all Arabs got more than all non-Arabs. Think about this. Really consider this. Furthermore, in terms of tribes, the fifth level was tribes. Well, before the fifth level, noblemen. All noblemen made more than others, or got more than those people after these first four conditions. So look at it again. Forerunners, the people who came to Islam early, those people got more than others. Muhajirun from Quraysh got more than all other Muhajirun. Muhajirun, who were all Muhajirun, got more than all other Quraysh. Furthermore, then the noblemen, the Arabs over non-Arabs, and then the noblemen over everyone else. Now, it didn't stop there. The tribalism emerged even more here. What happened? Banu Murad got over Banu Rabi. Murad and Rabi, these were two tribes. How shall I explain this? Based on the historians, when you look at the history of Arabia, you will find that there were two bloodlines in the Arabs, two known bloodlines amongst the Arabs. What were these? These were the Adnan and the Khahtan. Adnan was one bloodline, Khahtan was another bloodline. Within Adnan, there were two tribes or two clans or two offshoots of that within Adnan. Again, there were the two major bloodlines of the Arabs. There was Adnan, Khahtan. Leave Khahtan to the side for a moment. In Adnan, you had Murad and Rabi. Of these two, within Murad, you will find the Quraysh. Notice these are all important. The next level, or the sixth level of what Umar did in his rule of Khilafah, he said that Murad will get more than Rabi'. That is, the people who adhere or are from the tribe of Murad will get more than Rabi'. Now notice, all of this is happening. All of these dimensions. This didn't exist during the time of Abu Bakr. This did not exist during the time of Rasulullah. This was implemented as an innovation, as a bid'ah, as a change to the principle and the practice of Rasulullah under the second Caliph of Islam, named as Umar ibn al-Khattab. Now the question that I leave for the Muslim community is, I, as a follower of Ahlul Bayt, should I adhere to this? Must I adhere to this? From our perspective and our vantage point, it's very clear. Ali ibn Abi Talib eradicated this when he became the ruler. He said this is not part of Islam. Because why? This, what Umar did, brought back pre-Islamic or the Jahiliyyah era, the age of ignorance practices back into Islam, which he accepted himself, which we'll come to in a moment. And so what happened? The person who, imagine if these policies are implemented, what happens? Ayatollah Shamsuddin highlights this, Sayyid Hakim highlights this. What happens if this hierarchy emerges? What do you think happens in the psyche of the people? The person who's the forerunner thinks, I'm better than everyone else. I'm privileged. The person, for example, who's from Quraysh and from within the Quraysh of the Muhajirun, that person thinks, I'm the best. The person who's Muhajir thinks, I'm better than the Ansar. The person who's an Arab thinks, I'm better than the non-Arab. The person who, for example, is a nobleman thinks he's better. The person who's Banu Murad thinks he's better than Rabi'. Again, also Aus and Khazraj, there was a battle between these two. Look at the levels of hierarchy of tribalism that emerged in the aftermath of the Holy Prophet under the reign of the second Caliph. I say this because according to Tarikh al-Tabari and Tarikh al-Yaqubi, both non-Shia sources, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah sources, According to them, it's very clear and very categorical that Omar himself stated in Tarikh al-Tabari, he says that I've made the environment, towards the end of his life, he's saying, I made the environment such that no two individuals will sit together in a gathering, that the gatherings have gotten so exclusive that no one's willing to sit next to each other. That the Muhajir thinks he's better than the Ansar, the Quraysh think they're better than the rest of the Muhajirs, the forerunners think they're better than everyone else, the Arabs think they're better than everyone else. Now I've made it such that two people will not sit together in a gathering because the Muhajirun of Quraysh, the Quraysh want to sit together, the Muhajir want to sit together, the Ansar want to sit together, the forerunners want to sit together at the beginning. The people who, for example, are Arabs, they want to sit together. The non-Arabs want to sit together. The Banu Murad want to sit together. Banu Rabi' wants to sit together. Aus want to sit together. Al Khazraj. No one wants to sit together. It's become all exclusive gatherings. Furthermore, in Tarikh Yaqubi, Omar states that I wish to, Omar's words, not mine. He says, I wanted to unite the people by seeking their pleasure. I wanted to give people what they wanted. I sought the pleasure of the people by seeking the pleasure of certain individuals. And he said, I've erred, I've made a mistake. I must go back to the era and the time of Rasulullah, and I will certainly do this. But what happened? He was killed before he could implement it. Imagine. Now, certainly, you've given people this luxury. You've introduced this system of class system, of hierarchy. Why would people want otherwise? Why would people want otherwise? You can see that this dynamic is what happened, and he was killed. He was at that moment, when he was killed, at that point in time, Uthman takes power, and Uthman kept things as is. I imagine he's probably thinking that I don't want to be a victim the same way Umar was. I will stay and keep things as the status quo because people like how it is. And nonetheless, this is what happened in the history of Islam. This hierarchy system emerged. Umar recognized it towards the end of his life, and he said it must be eradicated, must be demolished. And it wasn't during the time of Uthman. And what happened? Those people who had superiority or who had preference in society, well, their status went up. And so, as they say, the rich got richer, the poor got poorer, or the prestigious got more prestigious, the less prestigious got less prestigious, and it led to more societal divide. It wasn't until the time of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, that things went back to normal. That where he said, at least in this respect, he said, no one gets more. Arab gets the same as non-Arab. Someone who was a slave gets the same as his master. All of these things were looked into. This is what Ali ibn Abi Talib sought to establish. How did Ali ibn Abi Talib himself rule? How did Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen himself govern? I say this to the Muslim world. Understand why we love Ali ibn Abi Talib. Understand why we hold him in our hearts so dearly, and we follow his principle, the same way we follow the principle of Rasulullah. Because Ali ibn Abi Talib said at the get-go, at the beginning, where he's beginning his rule, he says, I intend to follow the book of Allah, the Quran, and I tend to follow the sunnah of the Holy Prophet. That's it. That's all I need. I'm not going to follow the sunnah of the first three khulafa. Why? Because if it was different, because the first two should cover everything I need. If they're following, the first three khulafa were following something that the Rasulullah or the Quran said, then very well, I'll follow that by default. I don't need to separately state it. But that means that if they're following something that's not part of the sunnah or the Quran al-Majid al-Furqan al-Hamid, then why am I to follow it? On what basis? It's an innovation. It's bid'ah, as they call it. I don't need this. The Muslim world doesn't need it. Nonetheless, but how did Ali ibn Abi Talib himself act in society at the second level? In the days, what were Ali ibn Abi Talib's days like? The day of Ali ibn Abi Talib as a ruler was sought in justice, establishing justice in every way. And this is a lesson and a lecture to all of those leaders in our communities, in the households, parents, for example, at the community level, community management, leadership, at the national level, at the state level, at every level. Ali ibn Abi Talib is saying, do what? He would spend the day and actually go into the market. Go in the market for what? To go shopping? No. Ali ibn Abi Talib would go into the market at some point in the day in order to make sure that everything is going smoothly and going well in his dominion, where he's ruling over, to make sure that justice is being established. So injustice is not prevalent. To make sure that everyone has their right adhered to. We're told there's a moment in time where Ali ibn Abi Talib is in the market. When Imam Ali alayhi salam is in the market, we're told that he sees a little girl, a young girl, who is crying. This young girl who's crying, Ali ibn Abi Talib, of course, He is someone who will always look after the people. He's like a father to the community. He comes forward and he says, young lady, why is it that you cry? Why are you crying like this? What's wrong? What happened? Is everything okay? She says that I'm a slave girl, I'm a servant girl, and I was given a dirham by my master to go to the bazaar in this date market, in this fruit market, and get dates. I said, okay. Then what happened? She said, then I went to this store, this merchant, this trader. I went to him and I asked him for some dates. And then I gave him the money. When I gave him the money, I took the dates and I went back to the master and I presented the dates, the fruit, in front of the master. When I presented it in front of my master said that these are not acceptable to me. I don't accept these dates. Take them back, get a refund, get the money back. At that point in time, she says, I took the dates and I went back to the market. I came back here. Amir al-Mu'minin says, then what happened? She said, at that moment I went back to the merchant and he says he refuses to refund me the money. He will not give me back the money. He tells me to go away. I don't know how I will go back to my master. I cannot get a refund from this man, this merchant, this trader, and I can also not go back to my master because he will beat me, he will harm me, he will abuse me if I do not get what he wants. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, let me try to plead this on your behalf. Let me try to advocate on your behalf. Let me try to speak on your behalf. Ali ibn Abi Talib at that point in time, he goes towards the merchant, he goes towards the trader. Notice this principle. Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and I say this to myself and all the dear brothers and sisters across the globe, he says, make sure you know the rules and the principles and the ethics, most importantly in this situation, of business. He's giving you the principles of how to adhere and conduct yourself in business. Ali ibn Abi Talib says to the man, oh man, this young lady has a grievance against you. What is the matter? He said that you brought the dates. You sold her dates. She took them to her master and she brought them back. You're not refunding. She requested a refund. You're not giving back her money. Look, she's a slave girl. She's a servant girl. She has no say in this matter. She's just the middle woman in this situation. The master gave the money. She brought the money and you gave the dates. She took the dates back. He didn't like the dates. Now she brought the dates back. You don't want to give a refund. She's just in the middle of this. Leave her alone. Let her be. Refund the money. Be away with it and let her have some ease. She's crying. For goodness sake, have a heart, have some decency, have some ethics, have some good conduct, have some moral. This is Ali ibn Abi Talib trying to be rational. Look, this is Bab Madinatul Ilm, but also Fatih Khaybar. He's trying to reason with the man. The man goes and he's standing behind his booth or his stall or his store. He comes out, and the tradition of the narration says he puts his hand on the chest of Ali ibn Abi Talib so as to almost shove him and push him away. Get out of my way, I'm busy, don't get involved in this, it has nothing to do with you. And he did this in front of all of the people in the market. When he did this in front of all of the people in the market, a commotion emerged. And when this commotion emerged, the people said, what have you just done? You just pushed the commander of the faithful, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Khalifa of the Muslim, the Khalifa of Rasulullah, the Khalifa of Rasulullah, the Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the earth. Do you know who this man is? He said, I didn't know. The narration says his face went pale. When his face went pale at this very moment, we're told at that very moment in time when his face went pale, he began to apologize profusely. He took the dates back, he gave the money back to the girl, he apologized, and he apologized. He said, Ya Ali ibn Abi Talib, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, forgive me, I apologize, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was you. But Ali ibn Abi Talib lays out a principle. He says, I will only accept your apology if you change your conduct, if you change your way of being, if you change your ethics, if you change your morals and how you behave with people. That means Ali ibn Abi Talib is highlighting a principle that today you accepted and you agreed to what I'm saying because I'm Amir al-Mu'mineen, because I'm Ali ibn Abi Talib, because everyone knows me around here. What if tomorrow somebody who's not wealthy, someone who does not have prestige, someone who does not have class, the level of class hierarchy that you want in society? What about somebody who, for example, go looking at the era of the second Caliph, what if someone who's not a forerunner in Islam? What if someone who's not from Quraysh or a Qarashi? What if someone who's not a Muhajir? What if someone who's not a, for example, Ansar? What if someone who's not a noble person? What if someone who's not from Banu Murad comes to you? What if a lay person, what if a servant comes to you? Will you give them justice? This is the philosophy of Ali ibn Abi Talib, which he sought to implement in society for you and I, for our world, to make our world a better place. I ask the leadership of our world, I ask the leadership of our society, I ask the leadership of our communities, Do you not look at the example of Ali ibn Abi Talib? I implore you to investigate and analyze and study the example of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And our own community leaders, do you go and sit with the community members? I ask community members in our own community, I hope and pray that you sit amongst the common people. Or is it that you, as a leader, the president of the community, for example, you have an exclusive group of people who you meet with, you speak with, only 4, 5, 6, 7 people who you meet with, and you don't meet with the people, you don't speak with the people, you don't walk up and down the corridors and the avenues of the lay person and the individual society the same way that Ali ibn Abi Talib did to make sure that justice was actually being established on the ground? Or are you just interested in the seat, the position of the seat, the same way that Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan was, the same way that some other rulers were? They just wanted the seat. That seat on the day of judgment will ask you some questions, or at least you will be liable to answer some questions on the day of judgment. The same way Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, said in his sermon, he said that one who rules over the people will be questioned on the day of judgment. On the bridge, on the Sirat, he'll be questioned about this. Ali ibn Abi Talib is highlighting you'll be questioned for that position. But how was Ali? This was Ali ibn Abi Talib in the day. He spent the day administering justice, telling the people, teaching the people, and actually living amongst them, sharing with them what is truth, what is the reality, what should be followed, what should be adhered to. But how was this Ali ibn Abi Talib in the night? How was this Amir al-Mu'mineen? The spirituality of Ali ibn Abi Talib, it knew no bounds. Why do I say this? In the night, we're told in the Darul Amara in Kufa, the main place where Amir al-Mu'mineen would rule from, the governor's palace. Ali ibn Abi Talib didn't live there. He would run the system from there, from the Darul Amara, the public house where everything is run from, where the government is run from. We're told Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, in the middle of the night, it's the middle of the night, at the darkest moment of time, we're told that Hubba and Nauf, these two individuals, are sleeping in the courtyard. They're sleeping in the courtyard, the Sahan of Darul Amara. When they see someone walk in, they notice they're sleeping, they're half asleep. You know that feeling that you sometimes get that you're half asleep and something opens your eyes while in the middle of the night? They were still drowsy. They were still almost fully asleep, but they realized something was going on. They saw that somebody was walking in. They say that they noticed it was Ali ibn Abi Talib. But in what state? In what environment? They said he was in a state where he was holding on to the side of the door just to hold himself up. He was holding on to the wall just to keep himself up from falling on the ground. And his eyes were filled with tears. And he was crying. And we saw Ali ibn Abi Talib in a state that we've never seen Ali ibn Abi Talib in before. And they said he was reciting the final verses of Surat Al Imran. Remember the verse I recited at the beginning? He was starting there. That he said, verily, in the rotations of the heavens and the earth, there is a sign for those who believe. There is a sign for those who believe and reflect on all of these things. And Ali ibn Abi Talib continues to recite those verses one after the other. And those verses filled with ma'arifah, filled with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was in a state where he was completely drenched in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These two people, Hubba and Nauf, they begin to look at each other. Ali ibn Abi Talib approaches closer. He says to one of them, Hubba, are you awake? He said, yes, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Nauf, are you awake? He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, yes. Are you okay? In what state? They said, Ya Ali, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Abu al-Hasan, you in this state, how will we be okay? If you are in this state and you are in this state of spirituality, you are in this state of reciting these verses of the Quran al-Majid, you are in this state of spirituality where you have complete reminder on your heart and on your mind is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How should we be? We're afraid. We're afraid, we're worried, we're concerned about what will happen to us on Yawm al-Qiyamah, what will happen to us on the Day of Judgment, what will happen to us in the hereafter. If you are in this state, and we who should be in your state are not in this state. He begins to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Amir al-Mu'mineen begins to say, no, O two, he says, Hubba, no, Nauf, no, that those signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken about, reflect on them. Think about them, contemplate over them. There are signs in these signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rotations of the heavens and the earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is Ali ibn Abi Talib, who in his nights he is completely engrossed with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ma'rif of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, he continues based on this, he says, one who fills their heart with forgiveness first, one who befriends Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one who becomes a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fills his heart with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the person who's on the right path. That person who loves for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and gets angry only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For any other love is a vain love, and any other anger is a vain anger. That everything that I do in my life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My dear brothers and sisters, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Abu al-Hasan, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abu Turab, Amir al-Mu'mineen is giving you and I the formula, the absolute formula for spirituality in our lives. This leader of the Muslim world is saying, if you want spirituality, what do you do in the night? Fill your heart and fill your mind and fill your being by doing what? By befriending, becoming a friend of Allah. What is the sign and the symbol of being a friend of Allah? The sign and the symbol of being a friend of Allah is that I love for the sake of Allah, and I become angry for the sake of Allah. I work for the sake of Allah. I read for the sake of Allah. I learn for the sake of Allah. I speak for the sake of Allah. I remain silent for the sake of Allah. I get angry for the sake of Allah. I walk for the sake of Allah. I talk for the sake of Allah. I adhere to something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I refrain from something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every single thing I do in my life, I do for the sake of my Creator, otherwise I do not do it. The kernel, the summation, the conclusion of all of spirituality is summed up in these two lines of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen, which he's telling his two companions in the Darul Amara courtyard in Kufa, in the middle of the night, crying, weeping like a child. He's saying this is how you should be. He's not doing it for his own sake. He's doing it for you and I to help us understand. If I, Ali ibn Abi Talib, is in this state, what state are you in? I say this because we're in the last few nights of Shahr Ramadan. We're in the last few nights of the holy blessed month where we are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guests, and his doors of mercy, his gateways of mercy are open. This is perhaps the best time to cultivate, to revive, to infuse your heart and mind and body with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask yourself, and I ask myself, do I do everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Do I seek wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And you may ask, how can one seek wealth? One can seek wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by earning income for their family, a halal risk and sustenance to support their family. It's considered one of the highest stations of ibadah. Or somebody can gain wealth, for example, in order to help eradicate poverty, in order to help feed someone, in order to help clothe someone, in order to help someone in some capacity, in some respect. Or someone can, for example, work in the day for the sake of Allah, or someone can stay awake in the night for the sake of Allah, or someone can sleep for the sake of Allah. Ali ibn Abi Talib showed this at every moment in his life. Whether he's awake, he's for the sake of Allah. Whether he's on the battlefield, he's for the sake of Allah. Whether he's awake in the day going in the market and making sure a girl has her right, that she is not being infringed and she gets justice for a refund, or whether Ali ibn Abi Talib's in Badr or Uhud or Khandaq or Khaybar on the battlefield, it's for Ali, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether he's awake or whether he's asleep on the night of Hijrah. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ. Amongst men are those who sell their soul to their Lord, their Creator, out of their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These people, Ali ibn Abi Talib's awakeness, his sleep, his stand, his quietness, his forgiveness, his anger, his ghadab, every trait was for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This, my dear brothers and sisters, is the kernel of the kernel of the kernel and the root and the center and the axis of spirituality that Ali ibn Abi Talib is telling his companions. Do you and I, do we incorporate in our lives this level of understanding, this level of ma'rifah, this level of consciousness and God consciousness? Those people who ruled before Ali ibn Abi Talib and some after Ali ibn Abi Talib, those individuals, if you look at the pages of history, you will find, did they ask themselves this question? Perhaps they should have. The same way Omar said during the second Khalifa said during his rule at the end of his life, he said, I sought the people's pleasure for the sake of the people themselves. Ali ibn Abi Talib says, I seek the pleasure of the people for Allah's sake. No, I seek Allah's pleasure. And by that means, every pleasure I seek ultimately goes back to Allah. It does not go back to the people. If Ali ibn Abi Talib forgives someone, if he gets angry at someone, it's not personal. It's all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the principle that you and I must adopt in our lives, to live and to learn from the life of the commander of the faithful, because that is where we get true Islamic philosophy, true Islamic ethics, and true Islamic spirituality. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to get a glimpse and a fraction of the ma'rifah of Ali ibn Abi Talib, to see of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, from a fraction of the glance of Ali ibn Abi Talib, his vision metaphorically. How did he see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Ya Allah, allow us to establish. Ya Allah, allow there to be peace and harmony on our earth and our planet. Ya Allah, allow there to be an environment with the Shia of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. They have peace and tranquility and they're not killed, whether it's a maternity ward in Kabul or whether it's a young girl in Blackburn, UK, or whoever it may be across the globe. Ya Allah, bring peace to the followers of Ahlul Bayt in specific, and bring peace and tranquility to all Muslims and all of the global human community, Muslim or otherwise. Bring them peace, equity, harmony in every respect. Oh my Lord, oh Creator, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allow us to have your love entrenched in our heart. Allow us to have your ma'rifah entrenched in our minds and our beings, so that there is not a single moment of our lives where we are not thinking about you. Everything we do, we connect back to you and we do for your sake, the same way that Ali ibn Abi Talib had advised us to. Ya Allah, allow us to allow us to be part of, and allow us to not be a blockade and a hindrance to the reappearance of the Imam of our time. Hasten his reappearance and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdu lillahi rabbil alamin.